This week we've been looking at the SR11 digital streamer from FiiO, and our first video clocked up, I think, 70,000 views in its first 4 days. And that's already 4 times the number of people who attended the Hi-Fi show in Warsaw last weekend. Now, one benefit of me no longer attending Hi-Fi shows like that is that I have more time to read the comments beneath my videos, including the one that told me to shut the f up. So say hello to the bin, my friend. Now, the rest were far more civil, so thank you to everyone who injected something worthwhile into the entry-level streaming conversation. And I include in that thank you the many passionate Connect service users. But as I said in my original video, you still want the Win Mini despite its many other compromises. So everything comes with compromises. We just have to choose the compromises that disturb us the least. But there is so much more ground to cover with respect to the SR11. So what follows are 12 more thoughts on it. And stick around for the last one because I think it's a real humdinger.
This episode is brought to you by AudioQuest. The cable company believes great audio performance begins with great power. Visit AudioQuest.com for more information.
So a surprising number of commenters invented their own reality to misrepresent the SR11 as just a Roon device. And it's not. So a quick recap for those special people. The little FiiO supports Roon Ready and AirPlay, yes, but June's firmware update added support for Bluetooth, DLNA and UPnP, and USB storage devices. So if you want to stream Tidal or Qobuz to the SR11 and you've got an Android phone, you could look at using an app called Bubble UPnP. Although that app's main job is to stream music files stored on a NAS to a DLNA input like that on the SR11, but it also integrates Tidal and Qobuz. Ergo, it does local files, Tidal and Qobuz, all without Roon. Now, I'm not a UPnP user, but my job here is to think about the people who are. But again, know that Bubble UPnP is Android only. But no worries though, because iPhone users can avail themselves of the SR11's AirPlay input. So anything you can stream on an iPhone can be forwarded to the SR11. And the AirPlay 1 implementation ensures the lossless carriage of CD quality streams. All high-res streams though are downsampled to 44.1 kHz. That's an Apple thing, not a FiiO thing. And whilst we're talking about compromises, WIM's AirPlay is AirPlay 2, not AirPlay 1, and so it forces lossy encoding onto the transmitting iPhone for pretty much most streaming apps. Notable exceptions include Qobuz, Amazon, and Spotify. So that means if we stream Tidal or Apple Music over AirPlay 2 to a WIM device, the stream will be invisibly transcoded to AAC 256 kilobits per second before dispatch. So no lossless for you. Now personally, I don't use AirPlay all that often, but my job is to think about the people who do. And I know from a very recent poll, there are a good number of you out there. Okay, now back with the FiiO. Anyone wanting to stream locally stored files from a NAS to the SR11 over AirPlay 1 should look into using PlexAmp, because PlexAmp is a music-only streaming app that'll stream music files sitting on a Plex server to whichever endpoint you want using AirPlay, right? So on an iPhone, AirPlay will then push the PlexAmp stream to the SR11. And because the SR11 supports AirPlay 1, we get lossless CD quality when firing those PlexAmp streams into the SR11. Although we do get that with the WIM devices as well, because brother Thomas tells me that PlexAmp works in AirPlay 1 mode on the device. So even if it's feeding an AirPlay 2 device, it will be lossless. Now, I have Plex running on a Western Digital NAS that sits in my kitchen in case my Roon server falls over when I'm away in Portugal, because normally I like to use Roon Arc, but PlexAmp is a solid backup. So I see Plex and PlexAmp as a poor man's Roon, because Plex and PlexAmp are both free. Now, one downside of the FiiO's AirPlay implementation is the video sync when you're watching TV, or rather the lack thereof, because the audio lags behind the picture. And I asked FiiO about this, and they said they have no fix in the pipeline and no fix is foreseen. Now, some people have asked about the SR11's app, and I didn't mention it because it doesn't exist. The SR11 is powered by a lightweight operating system running on, I think, an Ingenic X2000 chip. So the code's pretty light, it's not very sophisticated, and it's too rudimentary to support a network accessible app like Wim Home or Blue OS. And that lightweight OS is also why we have to change the SR11 settings using the scroll wheel and the front panel display. So the display here is necessary. It's not just a nice to have extra as it is on the Wims and the Ever Solos. And that super simple OS also has implications for what the remote control can and cannot do. So without a central playback app and engine running on the FiiO, the infrared wand can only change the volume. There is no play pause, no previous track, no Red Hot Chili Peppers button. So the remote's cursor keys are for navigating the menu system, but there are also shortcut keys for changing the active input and the active output, which I think are much quicker than fumbling with the little wheel. Now, one thing I didn't mention in my original video was how the SR11 has two USB outputs. It has USB-C, which I mainly use, well, always use actually, and it also has USB-A. But as I emphasized to death in my original video, this opens the SR11 up to the world of USB-only DACs. DACs to which a Wim Mini or Pro Plus cannot connect. Now, I just put my coffee down because one example of an affordable USB DAC that isn't a dongle is iFii's Zen Air, which performs double duty as a headphone amplifier. And you can see on the back here, maybe it only has one digital input, and that is USB. And if we pair the Zen Air with the SR11 for a €200 streaming front end, we save €50 on the Wim Pro Plus, and we get a more natural sound. It's better, it sounds better to me. Not by a lot, just a little bit. And we hear that most obviously on string heavy cuts like Michael Nyman's Funeral Marching and absolutely epic Memorial. It's from the soundtrack he made for the movie, is it The Cook, the Thief, His Wife and Her Lover? Or something like that. But yeah, the differences aren't night and day. And in the DAC world, this destroys that. I gotta say, it's utter bollocks, especially when heard in the context of loudspeaker differences. But USB has another advantage over coax and Toslink, and that is greater bandwidth. So the USB socket found on many hi-fi products is where the highest sample rate support lives, including DSD. Now, I don't do DSD, but my job is to consider the people who do. Now, most coax and Toslink sockets top out at 24.192, some at 24.96, but most modern USB inputs will support up to, say, 384 kHz and DSD 256. Others even do 768 kHz and DSD 512. Now, the iFi Zen Air supports PCM up to 384 kHz and it does DSD up to DSD 256. Also, in my last video, I said that a Raspberry Pi 5 kit sells for more than the SR11's €100 asking price, and it does. But in that same video, I showed a Pi 3B, I think, with a SPDIF hat. Now, we can put a Pi 3 and a SPDIF hat together with a power supply and a custom case for close to €100, yes. But even if we hit that financial target, we still won't have overcome the Pi's biggest hurdle, and that's software. Because choosing an operating system and writing an ISO to a micro SD card isn't for beginners. Now, I'm not a beginner, but my job is to think about the people who are. And so a spitter-fatted Pi isn't as mom and dad friendly as the SR11, which is proper plug and play. Anyway, that's almost all from me for today. Like and subscribe according to your preference, and don't forget to hit us up on Patreon, where we've got 5 years worth of playlists, one for each video. And generally, I think we started out with Tidal, Qobuz, Apple Music and Spotify, and then I dropped Qobuz for a while, then brought it back, and then I added YouTube Music. So we're now doing 5 different streaming services. And yeah, as always, thank you ever so much for watching, and stick around because I've got one more very important point to make. Okay, let's round out this video with one very important thought. So, whenever I review a Chinese-made product selling for many hundreds or many thousands of dollars, I receive, like clockwork, a steady stream of comments grumbling about the country of origin. And they generally read something like this: "Made in China, no thanks." So people aren't being rude, but they're very much not into, so they say, not into products made in China. Now, yes, there are many reasons to complain about China, but this isn't a geopolitical channel, so I won't go there. And yet, I want you to have a guess at how many of those types of comments were left beneath my original SR11 video. That's right, absolutely none. And it was a similar story a few months back with the K11 R2R DAC review video. So what do these two units have in common apart from being made by FiiO in China? Yep, they are both what many people would consider to be affordable. So this tells us that people are prepared to look the other way when something is made in China if it benefits their wallet. So I've said it before and I'll say it again here. Complaints about Chinese-made hi-fi products aren't about ethics or politics. They're about money, a coping mechanism for products that some people desire but cannot afford, and so they have to push it away somehow.